everyone! Well, after 20 years in horrible development, The Flash has finally came out, and I like The Flash as a character, so I was really hyped to see this movie, and I actually went out and saw it with my friends on the grand premiere last Thursday night. Now, I have to unfortunately say this movie is a bit of a miss. It's not outright terrible, and I myself am probably going to have a very skewed opinion of it, because I love The Flash. I've literally been waiting 20 years for a Flash movie, and so my expectations for what this movie had to do, what it had to be, and just everything riding on it were extremely high, way higher than the average person, and for me, this movie just didn't reach what I was hoping for. So yeah, I grew up reading Flash comics as a kid, so I've really been looking forward to us eventually finally getting a movie featuring the guy. But the movie is pretty much like only halfway a Flash movie. Even though it stars the Flash, it's actually really a weird rehash of Man of Steel. But what if there was no Superman in that movie and Batman '89 had to deal with all that mess and carry that movie? Now, that being said, this movie is a light comedy, half a drama, a little bit sad at points, but unfortunately the biggest tragedy of this movie is that sadly this is the only sequel we're ever going to see to Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I was dying inside hoping that this movie would go above and beyond and be DC's Avengers Endgame for not only the Zack Snyder DC universe, but somehow for the entire DC universe going back over 100 years. And while it wanted to be that, it fumbled doing that and it didn't reach that. So before I get into the spoilers, I'll try to keep it as non-spoilery for as long as I can for people who haven't seen the movie, because I'm aware this is the day it came out. So just to quickly boil it all down, Ezra Miller is a complicated guy, but his performance in this movie overall did impress me. Batman '89, Supergirl, Zod, those characters are awesome, and I was extremely satisfied seeing them all again or seeing them for the first time. But I feel like they failed to make this movie the big event that it was supposed to be, and once again we have another superhero movie in this decade that has just fumbled and completely messed with the multiverse concept and not gotten it right, which is starting to become a pattern and starting to really stink up the room. Speaking of stinking up the room, let's start with the elephant in the room, Ezra Miller himself. Now, famously from around the time this movie started production decades ago to about slightly a year ago, Ezra Miller has been in the midst of a full mental breakdown for a variety of different reasons, and he has done some extremely despicable things to men, women, the population of Hawaii and Iceland. Like, he has abused multiple different women at multiple different places and paid them off with his massive amounts of money to get away with it. He got arrested in Hawaii for attacking people, breaking into people's houses. The crimes of Ezra Miller are so deep and so rich that there will definitely be a docuseries about them someday, now that this movie has passed and he's probably no longer under Warner Brothers protection. Like, Ezra Miller exposes the two-tiered crime system in America, where crimes just exist, but if you're rich enough to pay for them, you can do them. Like, there are like so many crazy rumors about the additional crimes that he hasn't been charged for, like that he was running a cult, that he abducted children, that he successfully indoctrinated a 16-year-old girl to turn against her parents, and most recently he abducted like this random mom and her kids away from their husband slash dad, and then he like gave the mom and the kids like guns and marijuana, like all these crazy rumors, all unsubstantiated, but there's enough evidence that, you know, he probably did the crime. So Ezra Miller is a very, very questionable person right now. Like, personally, I don't think Ezra Miller should be an actor anymore. I don't think he should work in Hollywood, because right now he's got major issues. Maybe he should never work ever again, but the dude has got to finish rehab, and the dude has got to make amends for the crimes he's done, because the public's just not going to forgive him, like, where he stands right now. Like, as of today, as of the release of the Flash movie, like, Ezra Miller is like in the middle of his rehab like arc, and I don't think a lot of people will ever really forgive him. Like, hell, I don't even know if I can ever really fully forgive him. And if he does make a comeback, I think he is on a career trajectory right now where he could be the next Robert Downey Jr. If you guys like are young, you don't realize that Robert Downey Jr. in the 90s was fucking hated. The man was only known as a drug-addicted fuck-up who got fired from SNL. But then he fully redeemed himself when Iron Man came out in 2009. And, you know, he had a good run where everyone loved him as Iron Man. And then pretty much everyone immediately went back to hating him when he stopped being Iron Man. Now, my point is, some asshole online had the gall to say that the Flash movie was so freaking good that it would exonerate Ezra Miller of all the crimes he committed. It would make you magically forget about all his crimes. Now, that is a friggin' line if I've ever heard one, but it just reminds me of all the crimes Ezra did, whether they've been proven or not. Now, I gotta be real with you guys. Crimes aside, if I just like put that out of my mind and pretend he's a nice guy, the acting Ezra Miller does in The Flash is honestly exceptional work. I would go so far to say as it's not only the best acting of his career, it's one of the best acting performances I've ever seen ever, and it's a completely unique performance because Ezra is not only playing the hero, he is also playing the villain of this movie. And he goes out of his way to do this full miracle performance, something I've never before witnessed, where he simultaneously wins you over and makes you like him as the good Barry Allen, but then drops you further and further in disgust as he's simultaneously playing the bad Barry Allen. I cannot say I have ever seen a film where an actor plays two roles at the same time like this, and by the end of the movie, I completely love and respect one version of him and completely hate and despise the other version of him. And that is an impressive feat, and I think that ironically encompasses Ezra Miller's own duality as both a man, a woman, a superhero, and a criminal. Now that being said, I literally could not forget about Ezra Miller's crimes during this movie. And seemingly the movie itself couldn't either, because there are just a couple of tone-deaf moments in this movie where the Flash does things that directly remind me of the crimes of Ezra Miller. Like, for example, number one, the Flash is saving some babies. And this is already becoming a meme because it shows the Flash badly interacting with random children, mirroring the rumors about Ezra Miller and the way he's badly interacted with random children. And then there's also number two, this like scene where Flash just casually steals his neighbor's alcohol. And this is a damning scene because that's literally what Ezra Miller was eventually caught by the cops and arrested for, stealing his neighbor's alcohol. So anyway, yeah, like, say what you will of Marvel currently, but Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, Spider-Man No Way Home, they've escalated the standards of these superhero movies by giving you so much awesome shit you never expected to fully realize on the screen. And I think Spider-Man No Way Home really, really broke Hollywood because that's probably the only successful multiverse superhero movie like ever. Anyway, so The Flash had to live up to that, and The Flash was unfortunately DC's only and last chance to do something similar, and they fucking bungled it. Like, not only did they bungle it, they left so much money, so much potential on the table because they just didn't make Zack Snyder's DC saga what it needed to be. They didn't make Justice League 2, they didn't make Justice League 3. They just made this Flash movie, and they were counting on this Flash movie to wrap up the entire Snyderverse, which was a monumental feat, and while it could have been done, they didn't do it. Instead, in this movie, you get a few seconds of Wonder Woman, just like a blink and you'll miss a joke cameo. She was actually in Shazam 2 for like way more footage. Then you get a few minutes of Aquaman, again, just him being a joke. Cyborg gets mentioned in the movie, but unfortunately, Cyborg has been blacklisted at Warner Brothers, or rather Ray Fisher has, because he keeps shit-talking everyone who could possibly hire him. And so, in the end, because all those characters are either jokes or blacklisted or barely in the movie, this movie, unfortunately, and just weirdly ends up being about the legacy of Batman and who is playing Batman in Hollywood. So you do get this really decent send-off for Ben Affleck's Batman, where he's just fighting some generic guys in like bulletproof vests riding a Hummer. That's pretty lame, but this scene itself is cool because Batfleck is like ridiculously awesome, but that scene could have been just so much better if he was like fighting the Riddler or Two-Face or literally like any D-list Batman supervillain. Like, this movie is unfortunately really light on the supervillains, and honestly that's a detriment to it. Oh, and what really sucks about this movie is so much about Superman, and even though Henry Cavill apparently filmed scenes for this movie, they cut them all out because James Gunn publicly fired him a few months ago, and it would be really weird for him showing up in a movie right after they publicly fired him, even though he filmed the movie 10 years ago. Ha ha ha. But yeah, his absence is so extremely felt in this movie because the movie just ends with a massive rehash of the Zod Superman fight for Man of Steel, but without Superman. And because Superman is so important to that plotline, Superman is mentioned like probably every fucking 10 minutes in this movie, and it's so fucking weird because this is honestly probably one of the most movies about Superman, and Superman is not in it. Or at least not Henry Cavill's Superman, but you know what I mean. There's not enough Superman in a movie that honestly should be about Superman, even though it should be about the Flash, and that's a whole other problem. So yeah, let's talk about the Flash. So this movie is structurally based on the best Flash comic of the past decade, Flashpoint. But despite being structurally based on it, there's only 3 scenes directly taken out of Flashpoint. Otherwise, this is relatively a brand new movie that takes the Flashpoint idea, twists it upside down, and dances around the Flash's origin. And mostly the movie boils down to Batman 1989 versus Zod from Man of Steel. Oh, and one last scandal that we got to talk about. Everyone's shitting on this movie for its bad CGI. From what I can tell, almost all the CGI in this movie was outsourced to India, and it was done by like Indian CGI artists who were like probably paid like $3 an hour, and overall they didn't do a great job with it. Now, most of the CGI in this movie is passable, but there's like 3 big moments where it isn't, and everyone's really like shitting on those moments. Like, there's the opening scene with the CGI babies. These CGI babies look super uncanny valley. They somehow look more plastic than if they had just used like baby doll toys, and ironically, because this movie uses slow motion so much, the babies look so much worse in slow-mo. In fact, honestly, I think the slow motion in this movie honestly kind of makes the CGI worse because it gives you time to spot how bad it is. Then the next thing that's like really like noticeable is like when Barry time travels in this movie, he goes into this like time coliseum thing that shows like moments in time as like these like big like coliseum rings. And the moments are rendered in these like really cringe CGI like models. And everything in this time coliseum is obviously a CGI model, but it has this like uncanny valley problem because like you're seeing these moments that just happened in the film, but all the characters look like they're made out of these like bad clay models in this museum. Like, the director is defending this as an artistic choice, but if it's an artistic choice, then that's a bad artistic choice, and someone should have called him out on it, because the clay models, the fact that everyone looks shiny, it looks like everyone's being rendered on fucking PlayStation 3 graphics or something. Like, they should have gotten the textures right, or if they couldn't made them right, they should have made them more artistic, because this falls right in the middle and it's pure uncanny valley nonsense. Like, there's no excuse for this. It's like an artistic scene, so you could have taken it more abstract, and you could have done this differently, but the way they did it, it just looks really ugly. Alright, I can't stop spoiling the movie, so yeah, just full spoilers from here on out now. So at the end of the movie, the last thing that everyone's like harping on with the CGI effects, there's a bad 3D model of the Christopher Reeve Superman, and it just shows up to explain the multiverse is out there, and it doesn't look good. Now, there's an argument online that they should have just brought Brandon Routh back for this moment, but because it's literally just like, look, it's Christopher Reeves, I'm going to say that wouldn't have worked because they're just trying to show the multiverse of those old movies existing, and I'll get more into that later, but yeah, so trying to recap this whole movie in my head. The movie starts with this kind of funny soft opening, there's a few jokes, and then the Flash goes to Gotham and helps Batman fight these like lame homo terrorists, while also dealing with a slow, crappy comedian who's like going very, very slow to annoy Barry. The scene is unfortunately the closest we will ever see to Justice League 2, and that bums me out so much because Batfleck is fucking great in the scene, and otherwise the scene is just half-assed. Then there's the ridiculous baby shower scene where that's a pun intended, and like I said, despite the intention of this just being a goofy scene where a bunch of babies are saved by the Flash, this feels icky because the babies are rendered in bad CGI, and Ezra Miller like does not appropriately interact with these babies, and it's very, very cringe. And then the Flash puts one of the babies inside a microwave, and that's already a meme because it's just so stupid, and I thought it was so stupid to be real, but I have to unfortunately assure you that the Flash actually does put a baby in a microwave in this movie. It actually happens, and it's dumb. Now, to give this context, in the movie, the Flash puts the baby in the microwave to shield it from a bomb blast. But the meme for the rest of history is just going to be Ezra Miller putting a baby in a microwave, because fucking Ezra Miller eats babies, and now they've shown it in a movie, and millions of people will never see that bomb go off. Anyway, I'm going to say now, the real issue this movie has is, for some reason, they're very, very casual about violence towards babies, and that doesn't sit right by me. Because, like, we start off with these babies in trouble, and then the movie escalates throughout its course, and eventually a baby dies in this movie, and that just really pissed me off. Honestly, this movie is like constantly throwing down babies in spaghetti as like a metaphor. Anyway, then we get some Flashpoint setup that Barry's mom was murdered and his dad was sent to prison for it. And in the comic, this was more believable because this was a massive conspiracy set up by the Reverse Flash. And in the movie, it's just a freak accident executed by a really, really good criminal. Anyway, so then Barry eventually gets so pissed off, he changes history to save his mom, and that's fine. By the way, his mom is randomly South American in this movie, or maybe she's Puerto Rican. I don't know what she is. She's some vague Spanish ethnicity. It's strange because otherwise Ezra Miller is very, very Jewish, so I'm surprised he has a Latino mom, but whatever. And then I guess he gets stranded in the year 2013 when Man of Steel came out. Now he runs into himself, and in a cool cinematic twist, the Barry from the timeline where his mom never died is a huge douchebag. He has zero humility, he's a spoiled rich kid, and the future Barry, who grew up poor with one parent, ends up giving this shitbag Barry superpowers because the Flash has to exist. Then they try to rebuild the Justice League to fight Zod because Zod shows up and Superman doesn't show up. And then they get Batman, but Batman is suddenly the Batman from 1989. And then Barry and Batman try to rescue Superman, who is being held by the Russians, but then it turns out to be Supergirl. And then they all get together and they go to fight Zod, but then at the end of the film, Batman 89 and the new Supergirl are murdered by Zod, and it's a really shitty moment. Now, for Batman 89, it's a warrior's death, it's earned, it feels like, you know, let Michael Keaton have a break. But the new Supergirl, we got such a shit deal handed her. Like, I kind of really like new Supergirl. I like the way they established her. I like that they always intended her to be Snyder's Supergirl. And I like that that means that throughout every single Snyderverse movie, the Russians just had Supergirl entombed in this like Sun Sphere torture chamber. But yeah, this Supergirl is cool. Like, she legitimately looks like Henry Cavill's biological younger cousin, and I like that. It's not like she's super Barbie like the Jurassic Supergirl. So yeah, I thought this was like honestly a nice, cool reboot of Supergirl. And technically, if Justice League 2 ever had come out, maybe Supergirl would still be there, stuck in Russian prison, surviving on bread, being tortured by the Russian army. But now Barry knows where she is, so I would hope Barry rescues her. But maybe he will, maybe he won't. He probably won't, because this movie will probably never get a sequel, so she's just gonna die in jail, unfortunately. I'm honestly kind of miffed that Supergirl and Batman 89 both died in this one, because I want to see those characters again, and I want them to eventually have proper movies. Like, the Supergirl movie was canceled when the regime changed, and I love her in this movie, so I kind of want to see that movie. And Batman 89, I still stand by the fact that if Michael Keaton and Tim Burton and Warner Brothers can ever get their shit together and do a good Batman Beyond movie starring Michael Keaton, that's $1 billion movie right there. They're leaving that on the table. In lieu of that, this movie, I really wanted this movie to be an epic Snyderverse send-off, and instead it just isn't. It's a light Batman 89 send-off. Like, Michael Keaton, Batman, amazing. Every scene he showed up, that's my Batman. That's the Batman I had as a kid. So I was just like fully impressed and happy seeing him again. And I loved all the crap he did. I love that he's Batman 89, he's back. I love that he has all this like legitimate tactical gear. He has none of that stupid smartphone crap that like Batman has been using lately in the comics and like whatever. But yeah, Batman 89 is back, but unfortunately he dies at the end fighting Zod. I mean, it's a good death, but I want more Batman 89. And yeah, let's talk about Zod a sec. So Zod's back in this movie. Michael Shannon, terrific actor. Zod was one of the best characters he ever did. He was not happy about being in this movie, but I was thoroughly impressed by what he did in this movie. He didn't do much, but honestly, for when he appeared, he was more evil and more of a prick than he was even in the original Man of Steel movie. I was actually wishing in this movie that Superman would show up and snap his neck in this movie. But in Man of Steel, I was horrified because that was like so out of character for Superman. But this Zod is like such a prick that he really deserves to die. But Zod fucking wins, and it's kind of hilarious because of how much bullshit the character has gone through, like in the long-term like ridiculousness of the Snyderverse. Like, don't forget they turned Zod into Doomsday in like Batman v Superman. But yeah, so anyway, Barry goes back to the end of time at the end, and he ends up fighting not the Reverse Flash like the comics, because, you know, how ridiculous would it be for the Flash to fight a big yellow Flash? Instead, he just fights an evil Flash, who's actually a grown-up version of the asshole Barry who didn't have to see his mom die. And this is this weird, like, claustrophobic fight where, like, for a split second, they, like, go through the whole multiverse, and it's just depicted as, like, a bunch of planets covered in old movie reels, like... This movie has a big issue, and it's an issue that's been coming up in a lot of comic book movies lately. And just as it stands, the only movie that's gotten the multiverse right is Spider-Man No Way Home. And then since that movie, every movie's been trying to copy that, and no movie's been trying to copy it right. It's the exact same phenomenon how like everyone started trying to like make their own cinematic universe, and no one could get it right except Marvel. This is the same shit. Everyone's trying to make their own multiverse movie, and literally no one is getting this right. Like, Into the Spider-Verse kinda got right, but ironically, same people who did fucking Spider-Man No Way Home. The rest of them just don't give you enough multiverse, and then when they give you enough multiverse, half the time they half-ass it in the end. And this movie does exactly that. It half-asses the multiverse. You just see it, and there's like no fucking point in seeing this. Like, another example, the What If show from Marvel, massively good use of the multiverse. They explored the multiverse in that show, but that show was made seemingly just to set up Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and that movie sucked. It was immensely disappointing because it had 30 seconds of multiverse, and then just like a cool alternate Fox Studios Avenger team that got slaughtered like pigs. We're in this like bad era right now where all these movies are coming out and everyone's trying to upstage Avengers Endgame, and they're all trying to do it the same way, which is the multiverse. They all think the multiverse is this like billion-dollar answer for all their problems. And the only movie that has done it right, Spider-Man No Way Home. And that didn't go into the multiverse at all. It just pulled characters out of the multiverse into the already existing MCU verse. Now here's the thing. The Flash kind of does that with Batman 89, but it doesn't really get into the multiverse. All we really get is a speech by Batman 89 explaining that the multiverse is spaghetti. And there's a scene at the climax of the movie where, yeah, we see all these different multiverses, but I actually hate the scene. I thought I was gonna love the scene, but I hate it because it's such a massive missed opportunity. Like, I had heard all these rumors that in like earlier cuts of this movie, Barry had used his powers to travel into these different multiverses. Like, for example, I heard that a bunch of test audiences saw this movie, and there was a scene where Barry threw himself into Batman 66 and he defeated the Burgess Meredith version of the Penguin. And that would actually make complete sense to me because the Burgess Meredith version of the Penguin was randomly in the background as like a stunt double in like Space Jam: New Legacy. And seemingly that was just the costume they recycled and carried over from this movie because, yeah, they were trying to go into the multiverse and go into the Adam West Batman universe. But none of that's in the movie. All you get is like a blink and you'll miss it second of Batman as Adam West, and I think you hear like the Cesar Romero Joker laughing at him, and that's it. Like, the multiverse scene at the end of this movie is just stupid because you see this multiverse, but there's no interaction and there's no real point in seeing it. You're just seeing it for the sake of seeing it, and I know a bunch of like DC movie nerds are gonna be like, ooh, ah. Like, for example, they show you Nicolas Cage as Superman from the movie Superman Lives. And so few people know about that movie because that movie was never made. that is strictly in there for like Nicolas Cage to be satisfied that he never got to wear the suit, and for a bunch of movie nerds to be like, oh, look at that. Like, here's how you could have ended this movie. Instead of having all this weird bullshit movies where like you see all these like different previous Supermans and like Adam West, they could have just like maybe like dropped into like one alternate multiverse and had like one other Superman come in and save the day and like help Flash defeat Zod. Like, this is where Brandon Roof's Superman could have came in, and it would have been like fucking pure hype. But maybe that wasn't the point with this movie. Like, this movie really, really wanted to be Avengers Endgame, but it didn't have the ending like Avengers Endgame. And it could have had the Avengers Endgame ending because it built up to it, but then it didn't take advantage of it. Like, if the Flash had just teamed up with all these alternate Supermen and like the Adam West Batman to fight Zod and the evil Flash, I would have told you right now that this movie would have been better than Avengers Endgame. But now they don't do that. They skip over that. So the scene is just awkward, stupid shit to just like make a bunch of fad boys like hoot and holler and be like, I know what that is. That's Nicolas Cage from an unmade Superman movie that didn't come out in 1994 because Tim Burton was fired. Oh, why? This ending fucking sucks. I was expecting this epic fucking ending that would like just be a fucking feather in the cap of the Snyderverse. And from what I understand, they filmed like 20 different endings for this movie. They filmed so many endings for this movie that literally when this movie was given to the press review last week, it did have an ending because they were still down to the wire debating what the ending should be. And the ending so let me down. Like, I'd heard rumors that the way this movie was supposed to end, it was supposed to just either cap off the Snyderverse and move on to the next DC universe. And I phrase it like that because the next DC universe changed trajectory over and over again, so they kept refilming the ending. But this was their last chance to give the Snyderverse an ending. And they just threw that chance away because I think the current regime at WB just doesn't give a shit about the Snyderverse anymore. They just want to release these movies and move on. And so instead of ending the Snyderverse in a satisfying way, or instead of continuing this messed up Flashpoint universe with this new Supergirl and Batman 89 being back, all that shit got deleted because that was going to Batgirl, and Batgirl was like throwing in the trash. And I had also heard that there was an ending where just everything went back to normal, and that still could have led into Justice League 2. I think we mostly got like 80% of that ending, but they added in one last stupid twist. The ending we get is just an ending. It's nothing special. It lazily sets up that Aquaman 2 is coming soon to a theater near you, and whenever the hell is that done. As a final kick in the dick joke, they replaced Batfleck because we're never going to see him again, and they replaced him with the George Clooney Batman. And it's just like, hey everybody, George Clooney is Batman! Ha ha! Don't you like comedy? And I'm just like, oh, not him. So, I mean, like, overall, the Flash movie was a massive missed opportunity. As a movie itself, like as just a standalone movie, I guess it was alright. But I am so disappointed on this movie because now the Snyderverse is just not going to have a good ending. There's no way they could satisfactorily end the Snyderverse in Aquaman 2. So this is such a missed opportunity. It's so bungled so hard. If you just want to see a Flash movie, it's okay. If you just want to see a movie where Batman 89 comes back, yeah, it delivers that too. And if you want to see Ezra Miller, then yeah, this is the best acting Ezra Miller has ever acted. So yeah, for all those things, it delivers. But I'm honestly like in a state of depression that they just half-assed the ending so bad. And they half-assed the multiverse crap so bad. They just seem to want this movie out the door and done. And you know, Shazam 2 had almost the exact same vibe. It just makes me realize that it has this like reoccurring theme that since James Gunn took over after Black Adam, they just don't care about these movies anymore. They're just trying to shovel them out the door and like do the bare minimum to make people show up. Like, in the end, this movie just feels unfinished. Alright, anyway, I'm New Buster Green. Please subscribe. It's summer, so I'm going to be watching a lot of movies. Later.